Ambassador Jack Wright straightened his tie and took a deep breath. The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber loomed before him, their polished surface reflecting the soft blue lights of the hallway. Behind him stood his small team of human diplomats, their faces tense but determined. "Remember the plan," Jack said quietly. "No matter what happens in there, we stick to the facts." Olivia Martinez, his chief aide, nodded. "The projections are clear, sir. They need to hear this, whether they want to or not." The doors slid open silently, revealing the Grand Council chamber. Jack had visited this room dozens of times over his 8-year posting as Earth's ambassador, but its splendor still impressed him. The circular room stretched nearly half a kilometer across, with tiered seating rising in concentric rings. Each section was modified to accommodate the vastly different physiologies of the 37 spacefaring civilizations that made up the Galactic Council. As the human delegation entered, conversations died down. Hundreds of eyes, optical sensors, and sensory appendages turned toward them. Earth was the newest member of the Council, admitted just 26 years ago, after humans developed their first faster-than-light drive. Many of the older species still viewed them as primitive upstarts. Council Speaker Vril Exa, a tall, willowy being with iridescent skin, gestured to the central podium. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Jack Wright of Earth. You have requested an emergency session, Ambassador. The floor is yours." Jack walked to the podium, his footsteps echoing in the now silent chamber. The gravity felt slightly off, as it always did on the Council station, but he had long since learned to adapt. "Honorable representatives of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice steady. "For the past century, humanity has been grateful for your guidance as we've taken our first steps into the galactic community. We've learned much from your wisdom and experience." Several representatives nodded approvingly. The Muldarian delegate, a spherical being floating in a containment field, pulsed a soft shade of blue, their way of expressing agreement. "However," Jack continued, "today I stand before you not to seek guidance, but to offer a warning." The atmosphere in the room shifted. Jack could feel the change, a sudden tension rippling through the assembly. "Based on data collected from our deep space observation posts and confirmed by artifacts recovered from excavations on Mars, Earth has concluded that our galaxy faces an imminent threat of unprecedented scale." He paused, looking around the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. "It is the official position of Earth that the time for diplomatic half-measures has passed. It's time for war." The chamber erupted in chaos. The Ardulian representatives, insectoid beings nearly 3 meters tall, clicked their mandibles in agitation. The Zorn delegation, small rodent-like creatures known for their peaceful nature, huddled together in apparent distress. From the upper tiers, the gaseous Celtec released clouds of yellow vapor, a sign of extreme alarm. "Order. We will have order," Vril Exa called, their skin flashing red and orange in distress. From the security tier, armored guards moved closer to the human delegation. Jack stood firm at the podium, waiting for the uproar to subside. Representative Zex Thrax of the Ardulan hegemony rose to his full height, towering over his section. "Is this how humans express gratitude for their admission to the Council? With threats of war? Against whom do you intend to fight, Ambassador Wright?" "Us?" Shouts of agreement echoed through the chamber. Jack noticed security drones moving into position above them. Only Ambassador Nyleth of the Solarian Alliance remained calm. The ancient being, resembling a tall humanoid with gold-flecked skin, studied Jack with 6 eyes that seemed to see through him. Olivia stepped forward, touching Jack's arm in warning. The situation was deteriorating exactly as they had predicted. "Please," Jack raised his hands. "You misunderstand. Earth is not declaring war on the Council or any of its members. We're warning you about a threat that concerns us all." "Silence," roared Zex Thrax. "Security, detain the human delegation. The Council will deliberate on this outrage." As security drones surrounded them, Jack caught Nilith's gaze. The Solarian gave him the slightest nod. Someone, at least, was willing to listen. The security drones formed a tight circle around Jack and his team. Their sleek metallic bodies hummed with energy, ready to stun if anyone made a sudden move. Olivia stepped forward despite the danger, her voice cutting through the chamber's chaos. "Please listen. We aren't threatening the council," she shouted. The translator device at her throat ensured every species could understand her words, but few seemed willing to hear them. Jack watched as council speaker Vril struggled to restore order. The tall alien skin had turned a deep purple, a sign of extreme stress in their species. After several minutes of banging a ceremonial staff against the floor, the noise finally began to subside. "Explain yourself, Ambassador Wright," Vril demanded. "Your words sound like a declaration of war against this council." Jack gestured to Olivia, who quickly set up a small projector on the podium. "We aren't declaring war on anyone in this room," he said firmly. "We're warning you about something coming from beyond the galactic rim." The projector flickered to life, displaying a three-dimensional map of the Milky Way. Several red dots pulsed at the outer edge of the galaxy. 3 months ago, Earth's deep space monitoring stations detected these energy signatures, Jack explained. They're moving toward populated systems at speeds that exceed known technological capabilities. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Jack noticed several of the older species representatives exchanging worried glances. Ambassador Wright, Nilith of the Solarian Alliance, spoke for the first time, her melodic voice silencing the room. "These energy patterns, they are familiar to you." Jack nodded grimly. "Last year, a human archaeological team on Mars discovered an underground chamber. The walls were covered with warnings in 30 different languages, some so ancient they've been extinct for thousands of years." Olivia changed the projection to show images of the Martian chamber. Strange symbols and pictographs covered stone walls that seemed to glow with an inner light. All the warnings described the same thing: a force that nearly destroyed all intelligent life in our galaxy 50,000 years ago. Beings called the Void Harbingers. The name caused an immediate reaction. Elder Xinvos, the oldest member of the council representing the jellyfish-like Talon, floated down from his high perch to the central floor. His translucent body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. "That name should not be spoken," Xinvos said, his voice translated as a deep, sorrowful tone. "How did humans learn of this?" "The chamber on Mars contained star charts predicting their return," Jack replied. "According to our scientists, the time is now." Dr. Alan Morgan, the lead scientist of the Mars expedition, stepped forward cautiously. The security drones adjusted their positions but allowed him to speak. "The energy signatures we've detected match exactly with descriptions in the Martian records," he explained, pointing to data scrolling beside the galactic map. "And we found this." The projection changed to show a small black cube covered in swirling patterns. "This device activates in the presence of Void Harbinger technology," Dr. Morgan continued. 3 days ago, it began pulsing." Xinvos drifted closer to examine the projection, his tentacles trembling. "The warning cube. We thought all were destroyed." Jack looked around the chamber, noting how many representatives now appeared frightened rather than angry. "The council has known about this threat all along, hasn't it?" Elder Xinvos turned to address the entire assembly. "What the human says is true. The Void Harbingers are not legend, but history. The first Galactic Council was formed to fight them after they destroyed thousands of worlds." Shocked whispers filled the room. Many younger species representatives looked confused or betrayed. "The knowledge was kept secret," Xinvos continued, "to prevent panic and to allow our civilizations to develop in peace, not in fear." Jack stepped forward again. "With respect, Elder, that time of peace is ending. The Harbingers are returning, and hiding won't save us. Earth isn't declaring war on the Council. We're saying it's time for all of us to prepare for war against them." Zex Thrax, who had been watching silently, clicked his mandibles together. If what you say is true, human, then your species has doomed us all by breaking the silence. Nilith rose gracefully from her seat. Perhaps Zexthrax, or perhaps they have saved us by giving us time to prepare. Elder Xinvos floated to the center of the council chamber, his translucent body glowing with soft blue light. The security drones had pulled back, but still hovered nearby, watching the human delegation closely. It has been 50,000 years, Xinvos began, his voice echoing through the now silent room. My species is one of only 6 that survived the first invasion. The Void Harbingers came without warning, destroying entire solar systems. They did not communicate or negotiate. They simply consumed. Jack watched as the Elder's memories made his tentacles curl in what seemed like pain. Even after thousands of years, the horror remained fresh. How did you defeat them? Olivia asked gently. Xinvos's body pulsed dark purple, a sign of deep sorrow. We did not defeat them. Not truly. The united forces of all spacefaring species fought for nearly a century. Billions died. Entire civilizations ended. In the final battle, we managed to push them beyond the galactic rim, but at terrible cost. Dr. Morgan stepped forward with his datapad. According to the Martian records, the Harbingers promised to return. Yes, Xinvos confirmed. Their final message, broadcast across all channels as they retreated. We will return when the galaxy is ripe again. The chamber erupted in worried conversations. Species that had been bitter enemies moments before now leaned toward each other, sharing their fear. The oldest members of the council, Xinvos continued, have passed down this knowledge in secret for generations. We hope the Harbingers had perished in the void between galaxies, or that they have found easier prey elsewhere. Jack spread his hands. Hope isn't a strategy. We need to prepare. Zexthrax clicked his mandibles. What can we possibly do? If the combined might of the galaxy could only push them back before, what chance do we have now? Dr. Morgan projected new images, complex charts, and energy readings. We've been studying the Martian warnings for months. Based on our calculations, the Harbingers will arrive within 5 years, not in full force at first, but with scouting parties. 5 years? Gasped a representative from the plant-like Flore Collective. That is no time at all. It's enough if we start now, Jack insisted. The First Galactic Council had no warning. We do. Nilith of the Solarian Alliance moved to stand beside Jack. Her golden skin seemed to shimmer under the chamber lights. The human speaks wisely. We must share all knowledge of the previous invasion immediately. Elder Xinvos hesitated. Much has been lost over the millennia, and revealing everything may cause panic across thousands of worlds. Jack shook his head firmly. Keeping secrets is what puts us at risk. Earth has already begun preparing our defenses, and we've barely had the information for months. Imagine what the combined knowledge and technology of 37 civilizations could accomplish in 5 years. Council Speaker Vril X's skin had slowly shifted from alarmed purple to a thoughtful blue-green. What exactly do you propose, Ambassador Wright? Open sharing of all historical records about the Harbingers. A combined scientific effort to understand their technology and find weaknesses. A united military response with shared resources and training. Jack looked around the chamber. And most importantly, truth to our people. All of our people. This last point caused the most murmuring. Many species had social hierarchies where information was carefully controlled. That would cause chaos, objected the representative from the Everin Ascendancy, a tall humanoid with metallic skin. Our lower tiers are not prepared for such knowledge. Better they prepare in chaos than die in ignorance, Jack replied firmly. Nilith nodded. I agree with the human. My people will support full disclosure and united action. One by one, other representatives began to voice their support. Some reluctantly, some with enthusiasm. The Evoran representative scowled but remained silent. Elder Xinvos drifted back to his perch. We will need to vote formally. But first, I must show you something that has been hidden for 50,000 years. The massive screen behind the council podium activated, showing a recording so ancient that parts of it were degraded beyond repair. But what remained was clear enough. Cities in flames, strange ships darkening skies, and creatures that seemed made of shadow itself, moving across ruined landscapes. "This," said Sinvos quietly, "is what we face. This is why we must prepare for war." 3 days after Jack's announcement, the council remained in almost constant session. The grand chamber that had once been a place of careful diplomacy and slow debate now buzzed with urgent activity. Species that had avoided each other for centuries now huddled together over data screens and strategic maps. Jack rubbed his tired eyes as he studied the latest reports. Sleep had become a luxury none of them could afford. Olivia entered their temporary office with 3 cups of a drink that somewhat resembled coffee. "The council has split into 3 main groups," she said, handing drinks to Jack and Dr. Morgan. "It's not looking good." Jack took a sip and grimaced at the bitter taste. "Tell me." "The Preservation Alliance is the largest group, led by the Ever in Ascendancy," Olivia explained. "They're pushing for limited information sharing and focusing on evacuation protocols. Basically, they want to save the elite of each species and abandon everyone else." Dr. Morgan snorted in disgust. "Typical Everans. They've always seen themselves as the next step in evolution." "A second group calls themselves the Commerce Guild," Olivia continued. "Mostly trading worlds and the banking species. They're suggesting we try to negotiate with the Harbingers." "Negotiate?" Jack shook his head. Did they miss the part about the Harbingers destroying entire civilizations without communication? "They think we can offer resources in exchange for being spared," Olivia said. "They're calling it practical diplomacy." Jack stood up and paced the small room. "And the third group?" "That's us, the Defense Coalition. So far we have the Solarians, the Krell Empire, and about 8 other species who support immediate military mobilization." Olivia's expression was grim. "Unfortunately, we're the smallest faction." A sharp knock interrupted them. The door slid open to reveal a tall human woman in a military uniform adorned with admiral's insignia. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her face, though older, clearly resembled Jack's. "Susan." Jack moved to embrace his sister. "I didn't expect you for another day." Admiral Susan Wright returned the hug briefly before stepping back to a professional distance. "I pushed the engines. Your message sounded urgent." Jack quickly introduced her to the team. "My sister commands Earth's 3rd Fleet. The Admiralty agreed to send her as our military advisor." Susan nodded briskly. "I've read your reports. 5 years isn't much time to prepare for an invasion of this scale." "It might be less," Dr. Morgan said. "Our latest calculations suggest their scout ships could arrive within 18 months. Susan's expression hardened. "Then we need to move faster. What's the current state of Council forces?" Olivia touched a control panel, and a holographic display showed the known military assets of all Council species. "The problem isn't numbers. Combined, the Council has over 12,000 warships. But they've never trained together. Their technologies aren't compatible, and there's no unified command structure." Susan studied the display with a critical eye. "The Krell ships have impressive firepower, but poor maneuverability. The Florey vessels have amazing defense systems, but minimal weapons. We need to reorganize completely, create combined task forces that complement each other." "The Preservation Alliance won't agree to that," Jack warned. "They want to keep their military assets for their evacuation plans." Susan's face darkened. "Evacuation to where? If these Harbingers conquered almost the entire galaxy before, where exactly do they plan to hide?" The door chimed again. This time it was Nylith, the Solarian ambassador. She entered with her usual grace but looked troubled. "Ambassador Wright, we have a problem," she said. "The Everan representative has called for a formal vote on the preservation protocol. If it passes, each species will be responsible for its own defense, with only voluntary information sharing. Jack slammed his fist against the desk. That's suicide. We need a unified response. Nyleth nodded. The vote is scheduled for tomorrow. We need to change minds before then. Admiral Wright stepped forward. I might have an idea. The Everans respect displays of strength and technological prowess. Perhaps a demonstration of Earth's military capabilities would impress them. Jack looked thoughtful. What did you have in mind? Let's show them how humans fight, Susan said with a thin smile. When we're backed into a corner, we get creative. Dr. Alan Morgan worked frantically in the small laboratory the Council had provided to the human delegation. Screens around him displayed complex brain wave patterns, while various alien medical devices hummed and blinked. Beside him, his research partner Kelly Boyd adjusted settings on a neural scanner. Run it again, Alan said, staring at the results with growing excitement. I need to be absolutely sure. Kelly nodded and activated the scanner. This is the 15th test, Alan. The pattern is consistent. The door slid open as Jack, Olivia, and Admiral Wright entered. Jack looked between the two scientists. Please tell me you have good news. The vote is in 3 hours, and we're still short on support. Alan turned to them with a smile. We have something better than good news. We have a game changer. He gestured to the main screen, which showed 2 brain wave patterns side by side. The pattern on the left is from a standard human. The one on the right is from Ambassador Nyleth of the Solarians. Susan studied the display. They look completely different. Exactly, Kelly said. We've now compared human brain patterns with samples from 22 different council species. Every non-human species shares certain neural characteristics. Humans are unique. Jack frowned. How does this help us? Alan pulled up another image, ancient text from the Martian chamber. According to these records, the Void Harbingers don't just destroy worlds. They enslave populations through psychic domination. Their neural control requires a specific type of brainwave pattern to latch onto. Understanding dawned on Olivia's face, and humans don't have that pattern. Precisely, Kelly confirmed. What other species considered a developmental flaw in humans, our chaotic neural architecture, actually makes us immune to Harbinger control? Jack sat down heavily. So while other species fall under their influence, humans would remain free to fight back. Alan finished. In the previous war, no species was immune. That's why they nearly lost everything. Admiral Wright immediately grasped the strategic implications. This changes our entire approach. Human-led strike teams could coordinate defense forces across all species. We need to present this to the Council immediately, Jack said, standing up. Kelly held up a hand. There's one more thing you should know. The ancient texts suggest the Harbingers adapt quickly. Our immunity might be temporary, perhaps a few months, maybe a year. But it could give us the edge we need at the start of this conflict. The group hurried to the council chamber, where representatives were already gathering for the crucial vote. The Everan delegate, a tall figure with metallic skin that gleamed under the lights, was addressing the assembly. The preservation protocol is the only logical approach, the Everan was saying. Each species must secure its own future. A chaotic, combined defense would waste resources and lead to greater casualties. Jack moved to the speaking platform. Before we vote, the human delegation has important new information to share. The Everan representative tried to object, but Council Speaker Vril Xe allowed Jack to continue. Alan and Kelly quickly set up their equipment and explained their discovery to the stunned Council. What you're suggesting is unprecedented, said the representative from the Muldarian sphere, their floating form pulsing with surprise, placing humans in positions of authority throughout our combined forces. Not authority, Jack clarified. Partnership. Humans would serve as coordinators, immune to Harbinger influence, while each species contributes their unique strengths. The chamber buzzed with conversation. The Everan representative's metallic face couldn't show emotion, but his rigid posture suggested anger or frustration. "This is mere theory," he said dismissively. "We have no proof humans possess this immunity." Elder Xinvos floated down from his perch. "Actually, we do." All eyes turned to the ancient being. In the First War, there was a primitive species on a distant world that showed resistance to Harbinger control. The Harbingers exterminated them completely before moving on. Their neural patterns, recorded in our oldest archives, matched those of humans. A hush fell over the chamber. Jack looked at Susan, both realizing the same thing. The Harbingers had tried to eliminate humans' ancestors specifically because they posed a threat. "The vote before us has changed," Nyleth said, rising gracefully. "We are no longer deciding between separation or unity, but between extinction or survival." The alarm klaxons blared throughout the council station. Red emergency lights flashed in every corridor as beings of all species rushed to their posts. Jack sprinted toward the command center. Olivia and Susan close behind him. "Report just came in," Olivia said breathlessly as they ran. "Harbinger scout ships entered the Proxima Centauri system 20 minutes ago. They're attacking the colony." Jack felt his blood run cold. Proxima Centauri was humanity's first extrasolar settlement, home to over 50,000 people. "How many ships?" 12 that we can detect," Susan answered grimly. "Small vessels, but heavily armed." They burst into the command center, a vast room filled with holographic displays and frantic activity. Representatives from various species huddled around tactical displays. Nyleth spotted them and hurried over. "Your colony is under attack," she said. "The Council is mobilizing defense forces, but they will take time to arrive." Admiral Wright stepped forward. "What ships are closest to Proxima Centauri?" Council Military Coordinator Grell, a stocky four-armed alien with gray skin, consulted his display. "We have a Krell battle group 3 light hours away. 2 Solarian fast cruisers at similar distance. The Muldarian defense platform is in the next system." "Not enough," Susan muttered. "The colony's defenses won't hold that long." Jack made a quick decision. "Admiral Wright has command experience fighting unknown enemies. I propose she coordinate the defense force." Grell looked uncertain. "This is highly irregular. Our protocols dictate." "Your protocols weren't designed for this threat," Jack interrupted. "And we now know humans are immune to Harbinger influence. My sister is the logical choice." After a brief consultation with other military leaders, Grell reluctantly agreed. Susan immediately took charge of the tactical display, studying the incoming data. "The colony has activated its shield grid," she noted. "Good. That will buy some time. Now, I need direct communication with all responding ships." As Susan issued orders, arranging the incoming vessels into an effective formation, Jack watched with pride. His sister had always been the family warrior. "The Harbingers are using an unusual attack pattern," Susan observed. "They're targeting communication arrays first, then power generators. They're trying to isolate the colony." A new alarm sounded. "Energy spike detected," called out a sensor operator. "The Harbinger vessels are deploying some kind of field effect weapon." On the main screen, they watched as a wave of sickly green energy washed over the colony's shields. Where it touched, the blue shield energy flickered and weakened. "That's how they broke through defenses in the ancient war," Elder Xinvos said, floating into the command center. "Their weapons disrupt energy fields at the quantum level." Susan studied the effect carefully. "The shield is failing in sections, not all at once. There's a pattern." She quickly issued new orders to the colony. "Pulse the shield generators in sequence. Don't try to maintain continuous coverage." The colony followed her instructions. When the Harbingers fired their weapon again, the shields flickered on and off in different sections, preventing the disruptive effect from building up. "It's working," Olivia exclaimed. Susan nodded. "Now we need to hit them before they adapt." The Krell ships should arrive in 20 minutes. Their main cannons have enough power to penetrate Harbinger hulls. The next hour was tense as the Defense Force ships arrived in groups, immediately joining the battle under Susan's coordination. The Krell warships fired their massive cannons while the faster Solarian vessels darted between the Harbinger ships, disrupting their formation. By the time it was over, the colony had suffered significant damage. 2 of its 4 habitation domes were heavily damaged, and the spaceport was destroyed. But it had survived, the first ever successful defense against a Harbinger attack. In the command center, exhausted but triumphant, Jack watched as the tactical display showed the remaining Harbinger ships retreating from the system. This was just a scouting party, Sinvos warned. They were testing our defenses, learning our capabilities. And we learned about theirs, Susan replied. We know their weapons now, and we have a strategy that works. Jack turned to the assembled council representatives who had witnessed the battle. This is what we can accomplish when we fight together. Imagine what we could do with proper preparation and coordination. One by one, representatives who had opposed the defense coalition began to nod in agreement. The Everin delegate remained silent, but others who had supported the Preservation Alliance now moved away from him. Perhaps, said the Moldarian representative, the humans have more to teach us than we realized. Jack awoke to the sound of alarms. For a moment, he thought the Harbingers had returned, but this alarm was different, a high, whining sound that indicated an internal emergency. He jumped from his bed and rushed to the door, only to find it locked. Security override. Ambassador Wright, he commanded. Nothing happened. He tried again with his emergency codes. Still nothing. The communication panel on the wall flickered to life, showing Olivia's worried face. Jack, are you locked in too? Yes. What's happening? I don't know, she replied. But I'm getting reports of chaos throughout the station. Something's happened to Elder Xinvos. Jack felt a chill. The ancient Talon had become their strongest ally in the council. Is he hurt? Olivia's face grew grim. He's dead, Jack. Assassinated in his private chambers, and the evidence points to human involvement. What? That's impossible. Security found human DNA traces and a weapon of Earth manufacture at the scene. The Council Security Force is rounding up all humans on the station. Before Jack could respond, the door to his quarters slid open. 4 heavily armed guards stood outside, weapons ready. Ambassador Jack Wright, the lead guard, said, "You are ordered to surrender yourself for questioning regarding the murder of Elder Xinvos." Jack had no choice. He allowed himself to be led through the corridors of the station to the detention level. Along the way, he saw other humans being escorted under guard. Members of his delegation, Earth scientists, even tourists. At the detention center, he was placed in a cell with Olivia. This makes no sense, Jack said once they were alone. Who would want to frame humans for Xinvos's murder? The timing is suspicious, Olivia replied, just when the defense coalition was gaining support. Hours passed with no word from outside. Finally, the cell door opened to reveal Dr. Morgan and Kelly. They were accompanied by a guard who looked nervous. You have 5 minutes, the guard said before stepping back. How did you avoid capture? Jack asked. We were in the medical lab when it happened, Kelly explained. The initial order didn't include that section. We slipped out before they updated the list. Dr. Morgan looked around cautiously before lowering his voice. This was a setup. We managed to hack into the security feeds. The DNA evidence was planted, and the murder weapon isn't actually from Earth. It's a replica. Who would do this? Olivia asked. We think members of the Preservation Alliance have been compromised, Kelly said urgently. Remember how the Harbingers can control other species? Well, we've been monitoring neural patterns across the station, and we're detecting anomalies. Jack's eyes widened. The Harbingers already have thralls inside the council. We think so, Dr. Morgan nodded. And not just anyone. We believe several prominent council members are already under their influence, including the entire Everin delegation. We need to get this information to someone we can trust, Jack said. Where's Susan? The human fleet has been ordered to withdraw from council space, Kelly answered. But Susan refused to leave without you. Her ship is holding position just outside the station's sensor range. The guard returned. Time's up. As Dr. Morgan and Kelly were led away, Morgan whispered, "We'll get you out tonight." True to his word, shortly after the station's night cycle began, the cell door slid open silently. Dr. Morgan stood there with Nyleth, the Solarian ambassador. "Quickly," Nyleth urged. "We don't have much time." They moved through emergency maintenance tunnels, avoiding security patrols. Nyleth led them to a small docking bay where a Solarian shuttle waited. "I believe your story," she told them as they hurried aboard. "The Everans have been acting strangely for months. Their fleet, which they claimed would be our greatest defense, has been systematically disabled from within." "Where are we going?" Jack asked as the shuttle detached from the station. "To rendezvous with your sister's ship," Nyleth replied. "And then to warn the Council about the infiltration." "They won't believe us," Olivia said, "not with the evidence against humans." "They will when they see this." Dr. Morgan held up a small device. "I completed the neural scanner. It can detect harbinger influence in affected brains. We can expose the compromised members." As their shuttle raced away from the station, Jack looked back at the glittering structure that housed the Galactic Council. Somewhere in that vast building, agents of the Harbingers were working to undermine the galaxy's defenses. "The real war," he said quietly, "has already begun." The doors of the council chamber burst open. Jack Wright strode in, flanked by Olivia, Admiral Susan Wright, Dr. Morgan, and Kelly. Behind them came Nyleth and a squad of Solarian guards. The chamber, filled with representatives discussing the human betrayal, fell silent in shock. "Security!" shouted the Everan representative, his metallic skin flashing in alarm. "Arrest these humans immediately." Council security forces moved forward, but Admiral Wright held up a small device. "Anyone who approaches will trigger this deadman switch. We're not here to fight. We're here to expose the truth." Jack stepped to the central podium, the same place where he had first declared, "It's time for war" weeks ago. "Members of the Council, you've been deceived. Elder Xinvos was not murdered by humans. He was killed because he was about to discover the truth. The Harbingers are already among us." Voices rose in protest and disbelief. "We have proof," Jack continued. "Dr. Morgan has developed a scanner that can detect Harbinger neural tampering. With Ambassador Nyleth's help, we've confirmed that several council members are already under Harbinger control." Dr. Morgan activated a device. A beam of blue light swept across the chamber, and above each representative appeared a colored aura. Most glowed a healthy green, but 5, including all 3 Everan delegates, were surrounded by a sickly purple haze. "Those with purple auras have been compromised," Morgan explained. "Their minds are no longer fully their own." Pandemonium erupted. Security forces surrounded the marked representatives, who fought and screamed in human sounds. The chief Everan delegate's metallic skin seemed to ripple and flow, revealing glimpses of something dark underneath. "How is this possible?" demanded Vrilixa, the council speaker. "The Harbinger fleet is still months away." "They sent advance agents," Admiral Wright explained. "Biological constructs designed to infiltrate and sabotage our defenses from within. The Preservation Alliance wasn't planning evacuation. They were systematically disabling our military capabilities." Susan projected images onto the main screen. The supposedly mighty Everan defense fleet, their ships secretly sabotaged, weapons systems disabled, navigation computers compromised. "This has been happening for years," Susan continued, "possibly centuries. The Harbingers have been patient, placing their agents in positions of power, waiting for the right moment." As security forces removed the struggling compromised representatives, Jack addressed the stunned council again. "We've been fighting among ourselves while the real enemy was already here, but now we know their tactics, and we can identify their agents." Vril X's skin had turned a deep, reflective blue, a sign of profound thought in their species. "Ambassador Wright, the Council owes you and your people an apology. You were right all along. We don't need apologies, Jack replied. We need action. The main Harbinger fleet will arrive in 6 months, not 18 as we first thought, and it's 3 times larger than our initial estimates. Long-range sensor data appeared on the main screen, showing hundreds of massive ships moving inexorably toward Council space. Nylith stepped forward. I move that we formally establish a unified defense command, with humans at its core due to their immunity to Harbinger influence. Seconded, called representatives from dozens of species, their voices blending together. Vrilka looked around the chamber. The motion passes without objection. Ambassador Wright, what do you recommend as our first action? Jack looked at his sister, at Olivia, at the scientists who had made their discovery possible, and at Nylith, their unexpected ally. Then he turned to face the representatives of 37 civilizations. First, we must tell our people the truth, all of our people, not just the elites. Then we prepare them for what's coming. We convert our industries to war production. We train soldiers and pilots. We share all of our technologies, all of our knowledge. Jack stood tall at the podium, his voice firm and clear. 5 years ago, humanity was just learning to travel between stars. Now we stand as the last, best hope for a galaxy facing extinction. The Harbingers think they know what they're facing, but they've never faced humans before. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes, sensory organs, and visual receptors of each representative in turn. Now, Jack Wright said, we go to war, together.